Back when I was in college, I lived in a 4-person apartment, then a 7-person apartment, and then a 6-person apartment. And now I am finally living on my own for the first time in a studio apartment. Despite the fact that I had a couple people I probably could have tried to live with, I was really excited about the idea of finally getting to live on my own and all the freedom and flexibility that comes with it. But just like with anything else, there's good things and not so good things about living by myself. So these are all the things that I love and that I hate about living alone in my studio apartment. One of the biggest things I was looking forward to back when I was in college when it came to living on my own was no longer having any of the distractions and noise that come from living with 5 or 6 other people. Although, then again, with all the background noises I've been hearing today from my neighbors, maybe I didn't quite get the silence I was expecting. But for the most part, it is significantly quieter living on my own than it was living with other people. Especially when I'm trying to focus and get a lot of work done, or if I'm trying to film a video like this, I definitely appreciate having some of that silence and not having to worry about people coming and knocking on the door and just in general being interrupted. Another one of the areas where this significantly impacted my life was related to my sleep schedule. For those of you who remember, I did a video a little while ago where I tried going to bed at 9 o'clock and waking up at 5 a.m. for a week straight. The problem with that was the people in my apartment were not following the schedule, and as a result, it was pretty noisy and it was hard to fall asleep because generally up until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, there was quite a lot of noise in my apartment. It also meant that when I wanted to film these videos, I had to get up really early in the morning because once anyone got up, started cooking, going to the bathroom or washing their hands, it was pretty much game over for filming unless I was willing to completely sacrifice my audio quality. The second big thing I've really come to appreciate is not having to share any of those common items in common areas that you normally need to when you have roommates. This can be anything ranging from your cooking area, your refrigerator, your bathroom, even your thermostat. And there's definitely something nice about knowing that you can go and cook dinner whenever you want and not worry that someone else is also trying to cook dinner at the exact same time. Now, admittedly, back in college, I wasn't doing any cooking, so I wasn't too concerned about sharing the kitchen area. However, I also knew that when I came out here, I was going to be making pretty much all of my meals for myself. And of course, I really don't think I need to explain the benefits of having your own bathroom, being able to go whenever you want, or shower whenever you want, and not having to share it with several other people just in terms of keeping it clean, are all definitely significant benefits, at least in my mind. The one thing I guess I should note is that in theory that means you're responsible for doing all of the cleaning, but at least looking back at my college experience, that generally just meant there wasn't a lot of cleaning getting done. The third and final big thing that I've appreciated about living alone is having complete control over who comes into the space and what things are in the space. Naturally, if you're living in an apartment with 5 or 6 other people, they're occasionally going to want to bring other people over into the space. Generally, this wasn't a problem, and this wasn't something I personally really had many issues with when I was in college. I think the biggest time this ever came up was when I was trying to go to bed and people were having a Smash tournament in our living room. But it is definitely nice knowing that if I don't want anyone coming over, I can completely control that aspect of the space. And the same thing goes for my furnishings. I decided to move into an unfurnished apartment, which meant I had complete control over what I bought, where it went, and prioritizing the space to work best for my needs, which were primarily filming videos and working from home. By living on my own, I had the freedom not to buy common things like a TV or a game console that I knew would essentially just be a distraction to me, but it also opened up a little bit of extra space for buying some other things like buying a bench or adjustable dumbbells so that I can get my workouts in my apartment without having to have a gym membership. And on a slightly different note, it also completely sidesteps the question of determining who's responsible for buying which things in the apartment. If you decide to move out, who takes what with them, and of course, if something breaks, who's responsible for replacing it. As much as I enjoy living on my own though, there's 3 primary things I miss about living with roommates. And the first one, which is probably the biggest, is social isolation. Simply put, now that I'm living on my own, I will sometimes go days without any form of in-person interaction, which can definitely be rough. And this isn't me saying I don't talk to anyone. I still do FaceTime calls with friends and family and chat with my coworkers. This is really me talking about that in-person aspect that I think you don't really appreciate until you don't have it anymore. And I'm sure there's a decent number of people watching this video who can relate to this because of the pandemic over the past year who lived on their own and really didn't see a lot of people. But this was my first time ever going through this. When I lived at home, I had my parents, and when I was at school, I had my roommates. And now, for the very first time, I've gotten thrown into basically never speaking to anyone in real life. For the most part, I think I've done pretty well with this, and I've been fortunate enough to see a handful of friends over the past month and a half. But I can definitely tell that this is starting to wear away at me a little bit when day after day you wake up and you don't actually talk to anyone in real life, and it starts to feel like you're living in your own little bubble. Now, obviously you don't need to live with other people to have social interaction. I could definitely be doing more in terms of going out and proactively seeking those opportunities, but it just made it a lot easier, especially as someone who's a little bit introverted. When you were actually living with your friends, you would see them on a daily basis and you didn't need to go seek out opportunities to do things with them. And the second thing I dislike about living on my own, which kind of ties into the first one, is that it's harder to coordinate meeting up and actually doing stuff with your friends. Back when my roommates and I were living together, it was as easy as one of us knocking on someone else's door just to ask if they wanted to do something, like playing basketball or going and grabbing lunch, and it was generally pretty simple to coordinate things. Now, especially since we're not all in the same place, it's a little bit harder to decide when we're going to meet up, what we're going to do, how people are all going to get to those places. It's definitely not impossible, especially for those of us who happen to be living in the same general vicinity. It's just not nearly as easy as when someone literally lives 5 feet next to you. And the third main downside to living on my own is that frankly it's just a little bit more expensive than living with roommates. Living on my own, I'm paying about $1,400 a month in rent, which was a pretty good deal at the time that I got it, and I imagine that if I was living with someone else I could probably get that down to about $1,000 or $1,100 per month. Obviously, like we talked about in the first half of the video, that has its downside. You're going to be sharing the common area with other people, so it's not like you're getting your own space. But if you're really looking for the most frugal option, living with other people is generally going to do that. The other way you can look at this though is by living with other people, you can typically pool your money together to live in a nicer place for the same amount of money. For example, I am not going to be renting at a house on my own. That would be a complete waste of money and I could not afford it. But if I decided to live with 4 or 5 other people, I could probably stay in a decently nice house with a garage and other house-like amenities as opposed to staying in an apartment complex. Frankly, I like my apartment and I like my apartment complex, and at this stage of my life, I don't really see myself as needing to be in a house. But if you're someone who really does want to live in a house, you probably can't afford that on your own, and as a result, being able to live with other roommates is gonna make that a lot more affordable for you, so you can actually afford to live in a house every month instead of having to stay in a tiny apartment. Obviously, there's a lot of nuances in terms of living on your own or living with roommates that I didn't touch on here, but something else that I wanted to point out before I wrap up this video is I'm actually really glad I lived with roommates while I was in college. I think that was the best decision for me, and living in a studio or on my own when I was in college, I think really would have been a big mistake for me socially. Knowing myself, I probably wouldn't have been going out and doing a whole lot with my friends had I not lived with them. By living with them, there was always some excuse for social interaction, whether it was having some sort of dance battle in the hallway, or playing Smash in the common area, or just going out and getting something to eat. And it's not that we were always doing stuff all the time, but by living with each other, it was just you're getting constant social interaction and actually seeing your friends, instead of just being holed up in your little dorm room in college. Now that I've started a new chapter of my life, I've graduated from college and I have a full-time job, I think it makes sense to be living on my own, but I'm also super grateful for my experiences living with roommates, because that was a huge part of my life for several years, and I think we had a lot of very interesting and fun experiences along the way that otherwise I never would have had if I just holed myself up in a dorm room. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor and hit that thumbs up button. I really appreciate it. If you're new here, consider subscribing for new videos coming very soon. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.